really like two particular points that he was emphasizing. One was the fact that um, he has done more with, the money that he's gotten from his career than a lot of, guys, professional athletes that are coming out of not just the NBA, but even the NFL, even the MLB. And, obviously earning tons more money than certainly the median income, but even what would be considered a upper middle class family. So the ability for him to impact his own community, change his own neighborhood, rebuild that community where he came from. So that was the first thing that really, piqued my interest, because I really wanted to hear more from him about what that looked like from him. And then the second thing was the, I guess, really the piece about how there's so much information that becomes daunting, and no one, or at least the folks that have the biggest platforms, they often aren't the ones sharing how they made it, what their solution was. So, because they've essentially made it at least to a certain point of, maybe some infamy, maybe some notoriety, but, certainly a platform that has a lot of eyeballs, a lot of ears, and, a lot of children, a lot of the same children that come out of the same communities that, the majority of professional athletes come from, which are not upper middle class families. Quite often it's lower middle class, if middle class at all, and just straight up abject poverty. So they've obviously, whether it was an opportunity, and it couldn't have just come from, a single opportunity. It had to come from a multitude of opportunities over a lifetime for them to get their shot, and then not only get their shot, be able to take advantage of that shot and ultimately make it. Yet they aren't focusing on telling the youth that part of it, and essentially the reality of what it takes to make it. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know if I fully agree, because one, I don't think that I listen to a lot of the same folks that Kwame Brown listens to. I guess the people that tend to get my attention, they tend to be more, more solution oriented. That's often the focus of the conversation, is like, what's the solution? Like, yes, we know things suck, but what's the solution? Even if it's not, a panacea, even if it's not the best solution, but just kind of hearing his perspective from a side, I don't spend a lot of time with. Like, I've never heard of even the podcast that was it Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson co-host together. Never even heard it. Hearing about the road with Kwame Brown and Gilbert Arenas. Used to be a huge sports fan, so I definitely appreciated it. Just from that aspect. But I don't really follow a lot of these guys off court. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting to hear that that is what is being pushed. In other words, as like you look at some of their videos, they have millions of views. In other words, so clearly they have a larger platform. I didn't even know it was Showtime hosting it. So they're in a their cable network. They're in a prime slot. So they get a lot of attention, a lot of visibility. And to hear that perspective from Kwame Brown, to say that, outside of the jokes and the smoking and, just kind of telling the old stories and, talking about the league, there really isn't any substance there. And that was my takeaway. There isn't a lot of substance there. And if that is true, then I guess I would agree with Kwame Brown that that would suck. That if you aren't imparting into the same youth that have aided in your popularity, if you aren't sharing the steps that you took, if you aren't sharing all of the kind of nuances, the things that, like, to me, it's like, what's the point of talking to somebody in any industry, right? Versus just picking up a book. You want that inside information that the book isn't necessarily going to share with you. You want the secret sauce, the the secret recipe. Like, what is, like, do I need to make certain connections, not just working on my jumper and working on my run skills and just all the physicality of athleticism, but the things, those intangibles, you know what I mean? Like, that's why I would be paying attention, especially if I'm 15, 16 years old, potentially a prospect. I'm looking, essentially walking that same road that a lot of these guys have already been there and done that. So, if they aren't sharing some of those things, then I would agree with his perspective that, just I guess sharing daunting information, it becomes, I guess, this. I think his point, that it becomes disheartening, it becomes dejecting, especially when you come out of, like, if you come from nothing, if you coming out of a community or a household that's not, a healthy household, that, you quite often have to, go without, either without food, without power, without a roof over your head, without shoes. And you have something, so whether it is the ability to play basketball, football, but in other words, you have something tangible that can possibly change you and your family situation. The last thing that you want is someone stepping on that thing that you have, that one thing that you see as an out. And if that's what's happening with these guys, which again I believe was his point, then I would agree. And I just thought it was pretty interesting. I never listened to those guys before. So I didn't, like, I guess I would assume that they would be sharing, outside of the locker room talk, they would be sharing those kind of inside tips. What made the difference for their career? What made the difference for, their high school and collegiate experience? How they got recruited? The conversations that people that they connected with. Sharing those times where ego got in the way, sharing those times where insecurities got in the way, and what they did to, overcome it, or, still dealing with it. But in other words, sharing that transparency where, folks can really learn those intangibles. So that was my 2 cents on it, man.
Yeah, I'm a big basketball fan. I remember Kwame Brown when he came out of high school. He made history. He's the first high school player drafted #1 straight out of high school.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting things that go with that. The NBA had been expanding very rapidly to the point where they had to go down to the high school level to get talent. So the question was, are the players getting better, or is just the NBA? Is it just supply and demand? It's more the supply of talent is X, but the NBA is expanding to Charlotte, to Miami, to Vancouver, to to Toronto.
New
So you have to
Orleans.
get right. Then you have to get talent, but the
Yeah.
supply is only X amount. So you have to lower the price of entry. And the price of entry, you have to maybe be a 4-2 guy or 5-2 guy, at least a 4-2 guy coming out of in the collegiate ranks, either been first, second, or third team All American, I guess. Then you have guys
Yep.
coming straight out of high school who have been proving themselves in the high school ranks, but that's not necessarily a proxy for NBA ready talent. But anyway, I was surprised Kwame could talk. I was in a state of shock because when I think of Kwame Brown, I think of a high school player. I remember, you always think of people as they were when you first met them. And when I
Yeah.
first was introduced to Kwame Brown, he was a teenager. I always think of him as a teenager. He sounded like that grown uncle that you do not want a problem with. And he was talking that straight talk, and he was just spitting truth. And he was on the internet. On YouTube. I couldn't believe it. That's Kwame Brown. And you realize this guy's a grown man now with a family. And so I was surprised he could talk, and I was happy that he was actually telling his side of the story. All we hear was the media side, and the media
That's
side was
true.
that
Yeah.
Kwame was a bust. I think that people were upset they made Michael Jordan look bad because Michael Jordan had just come out of retirement. I don't know why. To play with the Wizards, I guess he was sort of like a player coach, player manager type of person. And
Well, remember, it was supposed to be for ownership. It was supposed to be for a piece of ownership. But the Wizards, well, kind of looking back, because there was a lot of things about Jordan that I didn't know at the time. So I remember when Jordan first came to the Wizards, I actually thought it was a mistake because the Wizards always did their players dirty, man. Like they always. And when the fallout happened between Jordan and the Wizards, because like it fell through. So in other words, remember he played for the league minimum too. So when I first looked at it, Jordan ended up retiring again, and without getting a piece of ownership with the Wizards, I was like, yeah, this is that DC BS as usual. They got a legend to play for the cheapest price possible. on the promise to give him an opportunity to buy the team, only to renege on that deal,
right?
And then be out, because that was like the most they had sold for those 2 seasons, man. So yeah, I just remember. So I remember Kwame, during that time, but that was kind of the big thing as well.
Right.
While all of that was happening. So it was. But kind of looking back now, I think a lot of it was Jordan as well. Like I didn't realize how much Jordan played a part in the media perception of Kwame Brown until, to your point, hearing his side.
Right. I mean, either Kwame Brown's a bust or Jordan wasn't good at something such as drafting players, and that couldn't be the case. The answer had to be that Kwame sucked. But it was a leap for any high school kid coming out, back then, straight to NBA. But a couple of things. Kwame had a chance to tell his side of the story. He the thing that set things off was that there was a podcast for All the Smoke with Jeannie Buss, the owner of the Lakers, and she was discussing history of the Lakers and so on and so forth. And she was discussing this trade for Pau Gasol with, I'm assuming, the Memphis Grizzlies, but they traded Pau to another team for Marc Gasol and Kwame Brown, and that helped change the Lakers' fortunes. People thought it was a gift to the Lakers. Because Pau Gasol was one of the top big men. Then they also had Andrew Bynum, so you got 2 7-footers, very agile, block shots, long arms. It's pretty skilled to go with Kobe, because Kobe was talking about leaving before then, but then he changed his mind. So they won another championship with those guys, but another couple of championships, I think, with those guys. But Jenny Buss, we traded Pau Gasol for Kwame Brown and Marc Gasol, and then Matt Barnes said there was only a one player trade.
Yeah,
implying that Kwame
was,
and then he kind of tapped Steven Jackson, and Steven Jackson chimed in. And then Jeannie busted. No, it was we traded Kwame Brown too, and then Matt Barnes says again, no, that was a one player trade. Like again, and so they're clowning Kwame. You know what I mean?
Right.
20. The guy's been out of the league 20 years, and he's taken his share of the barbs. The guy's been out of the league for 20. Excuse me, it was 20 years ago when he first became a rookie or whatever. He's been out of the league now. They're still clowning this guy, and that's what set. That was. I don't think Kwame said anything after that, but then Gilbert Arenas came on like the next week on All the Smoke, and Gilbert was talking about his career, how he went to DC, how they had a franchise player in Kwame Brown. Then they started, Matt Barnes and Stephen A. Jackson go on again, and they almost kind of like bait Gilbert into saying something negative about Kwame, and that's what set Kwame off. So most of these, a lot of these, first called All the Smoke, I think they actually smoke.
Yeah, they do.
Well, so I think I don't think that's a good image, but I mean, it's not for me to say. But I think that's kind of like, what kind of image are you sending? We're gonna smoke while we're doing this podcast. You need to smoke that much? You can't wait till this podcast is over. I didn't know it was on by Showtime either, but most of these, the media, it's just gossip and entertainment. That's it. So if you're gonna have another podcast or another TV show, and your goal is to out entertain or out gossip the other shows out there, I don't think that's necessarily a winning strategy. You know what I mean? And that's how I complain about. That's how I complain about CNN. That's how I complain about MSNBC. It's just gossip and entertainment, and people saying things for entertainment purposes. No real content. Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather, even Phil. I mean, Phil Donahue he probably thinks he's in outer space right now, watching what's called the news in this country. But I'm not sure you can really. The flip side, I'm not sure you can really stay online or keep broadcasting if you don't hit the ground running. I don't think they give you 2 years or 2.5
that's
years
a good point.
to get your program off, like Oprah Winfrey Show or Phil Donahue. They had time. They had a couple of years to cultivate show and grow an audience over time with content, and the audience responded over time. But it takes a while to get an audience with that type of content. There's no not a lot of drama, not a lot of gossip, not a lot of train wreck scenarios, And so,
I mean, that's
so that's what set Kwame off. So he said, he was really upset that about he'd been taking bribes for 20 years. He kept his mouth shut, and then he has to take it from his teammates. Stephen A. Smith was his former teammate, and also Matt Barnes, a former player in the NBA. So there's a fraternity of players that you would think that they wouldn't treat him the same way the media treat him. So he pointed out the fact that's coming from his teammates. He's tired of it, and he wants it to stop. So he clapped back, and he clapped back in a real way. And I don't think you want it with Kwame. He'll talk about your hairline down to your clothes, and if he can, if something about your mama, if he can find it. But he's taking on. It's like David versus the Goliath. They have a big platform, and so that's what he's pointing out. You're going to guys who don't have a big platform. And I've also noticed that too, where a couple of things where you have anybody in the media, if they're gossiping or trolling somebody, it's always somebody who they think is weaker than them, who can't fight back, and he can't stop their bag. So if it's Michael Jordan or LeBron James, who they want to come on their podcast, they're quiet, but they can go with Kwame Brown because they don't want Kwame Brown on their podcast. So Kwame Brown doesn't have either work at a big TV station or whatever. If they think it's somebody who can get them a cast or get them a movie deal, they're quiet. They never say anything about one of these big corporations who could potentially put them in a movie or another TV. So they go with individuals who they think can't fight back because they have a network of these people. And I didn't know Charlamagne and God had an equity interest in All the Smoke either. But you have 10, 15 people with a lot of bandwidth who can all come at Kwame and just Kwame by himself. The other thing is that you have these people who constantly bash black men for ratings, and that was the problem that's what African Americans were complaining about back in the 50s and 60s. There's not enough representation of African Americans on TV, in the media, not enough positive representation, and we want more representation. And we thought that would lead to more positive images. So the argument with the police, we have more black people in the police force, maybe some of the police misconduct will stop. We both know that's not true. It's just that it's just more black people trying to get the bag and trying to fit in. So now you have black people in the media doing the same thing, making African Americans look dysfunctional and ignorant for ratings. In the 1950s and 1960s, maybe there were white commentators doing it. Now you just replace white commentators and white broadcasters with black broadcasters who are doing the exact same thing, clowning black folks for ratings. And Kwame pointed that out as far as Stephen A. Smith and ESPN constantly bashing black men, whether they can play or not. So he's talking about how Stephen A. Smith called him a bust, but he didn't talk about other white players who were busts. There were other players in his draft who weren't very good. He never called them out, particularly the white players, just the black ones. He said Stephen A. Smith even calls out the good black players. I can understand you. He said, I can understand you have a problem with me because I was a bust, but what about Russell Westbrook? What about Kyrie Irving? What about Kyrie?
Yep.
Constantly bash them too. And that's another point I always made was that particularly when it comes to black NBA players, that when you want to put Charles Barkley or Charles Oakley or Pat Ewing or Karl Malone in his place, you say, well, you never won a ring. And I think this guy named, I think it's a journalist named Brian Windhurst out of Cleveland. I think that's his name, who constantly talks about which players don't have rings and why is if you leave the league without a ring, it's an asterisk as far as your career is concerned. And he's talked about that a lot, where they don't say the same things to white players. Particularly, let's say, for instance, Archie Manning never won a ring. And Archie Manning was a great player. It's both of his sons, in my opinion. But he played with a pretty moribund franchise with the New Orleans Saints back then. And he was a one-man show. And he took a beating trying to, be a one-man show and trying to, do carry more than his load for the team. But he never won a ring. Who would say that? Who in his right mind, Manning, you're not qualified to have this conversation because you never won a ring, so you're not qualified to speak on this issue here, or you're not career was irrelevant because you never won a ring. If you said that, and if you said that on TV on Sunday night, you'd be frying fish by Monday morning. So Kwame pointed a lot of things out that we talk about, but he said it in a much different way about how this really. There's nothing much to talk about in the corporate media but gossip and entertainment. How much more gossip can there be? How much more entertainment can there be? Your big idea is to start another podcast or another TV show or another news outlet where you're gossiping mostly about black men or saying something entertainment, but it's never any truth across the board where if you say something, you would never say anything that could be considered embarrassing to maybe white ball players or someone who you think could stop your bag. And so that's sort of my 20,000 foot level take on what he's saying. And it's resonating with a lot of people. And we like to see the little guy fight back. And he's fighting back in a big way. And he silenced a lot of people. And there are a lot of people who think he's saying a lot of things that people felt, but maybe were afraid to say it. But now they see Kwame saying it and they feel like they can come say it. They can come out and say it, particularly former NBA players and their take on Stephen A. Smith. So that's my 20,000 foot level take on this. What do you think Kwame's so mad about? I think he's so angry.
Well, I don't get the impression he's mad at all. I get the impression that he is welcoming this challenge in the dialogue.
What do you say, y'all? Your podcast says all the smoke, but you should really change it to some of the smoke. But you don't really want all the smoke.
Yeah, pretty much. Because they ain't walking Matt Bond, Gilbert Arenas, Steven Jackson. They have been pretty much mum since Kwame Brown. And especially, what's interesting to me is that the thing he even said that they would do, exactly what they did. They ignored all of the substantive points that Kwame Brown brought up, which is one, why aren't you reinvesting in the communities that you came from? Why aren't you connecting with the youth? That was his initial response. I would say really that was kind of the main thesis of the entire response. He's like, you got 3 multi-millionaire Black men that have an opportunity to stand as pillars of their community, and you out here doing goofy stuff. and the only response that they've given him is the goofy stuff. It's, you know what I mean? It's like they don't even know how to have conversations as men. Which is part of his point.
Well,
like, really,
on that point though, is it partly the fact that they can't have conversations as men, or does the community sort of encourage this type of responses, this sort of ad hominem attacks, or a bunch of people trying to play the dozens?
Well, I think that's part of the point, because frankly, a part of manhood is standing on your square, taking accountability, taking responsibility, especially in the midst of adversity, especially when it's unpopular, especially when even a livelihood is being threatened. Because at that point, and that was a part of his point, in other words, that y'all are puppets. Y'all aren't men. You're puppets. You're beta males. Like, the puppet masters behind the scenes only allowing you to say so much. But you can't even say the things that are actually important. You can't say the things that our community really needs to hear. And from that perspective, I have to agree that they are and have responded, like they are what he says they are, and they have responded the way that he said they would respond. And, matter of fact, I don't know if you caught Jason Whitlock. So him and Curtis Schoon do a podcast together. And I wanted to hear Jason's perspective. He's at least sports wise. And he brought up some really good points that kind of filled in the gap, at least for me, what Kwame was saying, especially about both Gilbert and Steven Jackson, when he was essentially breaking them all the way down, telling the world who they really are, who they pretend to be versus who they actually are. I'm well aware of who Gilbert Arenas pretends to be. I've been in it was either Love or Dream, like that. So it's a club in DC, and in like 5 years they changed management about 10 different times. And the name changed about 5 different times as well. I think I lost you. Are we having some technical difficulties? Ralph, I don't know if you can. Oh, there you go.
I can hear you.
Okay. Like I said, it was either Dream. Like, So matter of fact, Dipset. If you remember the song,
they did a video.
Oh Boy. Yep. So that was Dream. So that was out in DC.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there one night when arenas, I don't know, like I 100% got what Kwame was saying, because um Gilbert, at least from the outside looking in, like I don't personally know that brother. So let me just say that. I've never sat down and, shook his hand, had words with him or anything. But the times that I've seen him, I've never gotten the sense that this is a brother that runs in the streets. But for whatever reason, when he got to DC, that seemed to be the image. Like, every couple months, he was, it was always with him and weapons charges. Bringing guns to the locker room. It was found in his bag. Like I feel like, every few months we kept hearing these, kept reading these stories. And then to see this brother in the club and, doing some tough talking. And even the dudes, like, even the dudes in DC that you may take for granted, that you don't think are about nothing, quite often them the dudes that you need to make a wide path for.
Right.
And I, like shout out to my DC, my DC family, because DC cats, they got hands. Like,
Yeah. I survived chapter 3 in the East Side back in the late 80s, early 90s. So they had more than hands back then.
Yeah, exactly. DC was buck wild, especially in the early 90s. But my point is, he was doing a lot of tough talking, and I seen him get run down by cats that wasn't even half his size, and all that tough talking went up right with him, because he went right out the back door and got ran right up out of there. And I just never understood. I don't know. I just never got it. I never got that thing where, guys wait until they're adults and now you want to, play gangbanger and you want to run the streets. And it's almost like you got some thug fantasy or something. It's almost like a midlife crisis, but you ain't even 30 yet. And you didn't get to run in the streets with the gangbangers, but that was your, I guess that was your fantasy. So you want to play dress up and kind of cosplay gangster. And I never understood. I never got it, I guess, because like it never made sense to me why you would double back. It's like you wait until you get, a lucrative contract and you have things going for you, and then you want to reach back into the streets as opposed to trying to improve those same streets. You want to be a part of those streets. And it seems like from listening to Whitlock that's what some things that even Steven Jackson is still, I guess, dealing with. Although, even according to Whitlock, at least his pedigree is authentic. Like he didn't wake up at, age 28 and was like, hey, I want to get jumped in. His came from, the fact that he actually grew up in the gang, but never disassociated himself. And I think that to me, it kind of exemplifies Kwame's point, because what is it to be? What is it to be a gangster? But to be contrarian. Like the very fact that you're a gangster is to be something that is antithetical to the status quo, right? Like you are defying the things that the majority of society are saying. These are the things that you need to either have, you need to walk a certain way, you need to talk a certain way, you need to have a certain job, you need to present a certain way, things that typically we call respectability politics. And what is it to be a gangster? And not just, in predominantly black gangs like Bloods and Crips, etc., but to be a gangster period. You're part of La Costa Nostra, whether you were part of mafia in the 60s and 70s. But the point is that the image and the idea of being a gangster was standing on your square, like in the face of adversity. Like to say that I'm willing to go against the grain of society and still stand on my square and do the things that I believe are better for me. And I guess really, how gangster can you be if you can't even reach back into your community to improve the community or even those things because someone is cutting your check, someone's controlling what can and can't be said on a platform that you're on. You know what I mean? So I think, like I said, I think that that was the part that I found, I guess really just kind of sad, man. Like, I just found it kind of sad. It's like, you doing all of this in life, you made it this far, you thankfully made it past. I think some of them guys are, over 40. At what point in your life can you truly be who you want to be? And even listening to Whitlock on Curtis Spoon's podcast, it seems like is that he I guess wants to do better, but his actions don't follow through according to what Whitlock was saying. And now being in a position that he can do better, but to see him not do better, you know what I mean? Like that's still, I was like, you're for, like, at what age do you look yourself in the mirror and be like, all right, these two legs belong to me, not, executives, not folks that can control the contract. Have I not made enough money? Have I not made enough decisions? Have I not supported enough people in my life to be able to do something better, do something that's going to benefit my community as a Black man, and to represent my community in a positive light? Like the fact that you can really respond to that. I just found it sad, man. And that's why they can't compete with that brother. That's why they can't, like you said, it ain't, they don't want all the smoke, they only want some of the smoke.
Well, hold on 1 second. Yeah, well, can you hear me? Yeah, well, you make up some valid points where I think people get the term gangster mixed up. What I call a gangster is someone who, like you said, someone who can stand on his square, someone who not run away from trouble, but know trouble's coming your way and still stand there and take it. I think a lot of people in the inner city get this concept of gangsters. It's 10 of us and one of you, so we're gonna jump you, or the odds, like we have the odds in our favor, so that's gangster. That's not gangster to me. A man stands in the square, like you said, and a man is willing to stand up for what he believes in and say what he believes, and not. And that's what Kwame's doing. Kwame's a gangster in this scenario. He's going at
Yeah.
podcasts with 1 million followers, backed by a corporate giant, and that corporate giant has other partners, whether it's iHeartRadio, whether it's ESPN, whether it's other YouTubers with hundreds of thousands of followers as well. And he's um, going at the whole army by himself. But then other people came in. That's gangster. When you stand on your square, this is who I stand for. And he's saying things that nobody was saying. For instance, I think what he's really, really mad about, other than the fact his teammates are ones chiming in with this what he called this little girl talk, this gossip girl behavior.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying things about him they would never say about other players who they thought if they thought there were gonna be some repercussions. But said something about Michael Jordan that I didn't know about. He said that Jordan when they drafted Kwame, they wanted to trade him for Elton Brand because Elton Brand
Yeah.
could help the Wizards win immediately. They never had any intentions of keeping Kwame Brown. He said the media knew that, and they never said anything about it. So you got a guy who Jordan never wanted. The owner, I think Abe Polian, nixed the trade because they had made too many trades. Told Jordan you're making too many trades, and he nixed the trade. Jordan didn't like it, so now he's bashing this kid who he never wanted. He said the media knew this and kept it to themselves and made it seem like he was a bust, so on and so forth. And he talked about the way Jordan treated him. Um, Talk bad about him. Some of the fallout between Abe Polian and Jordan, from what I understand, is the fact that Abe Polian said, you can't talk to the players like this, Mike. Abe Polian, the white owner has to tell Michael Jordan, you can't talk to the players like that. And I always thought the falling out with Abe Polian and Jordan was the fact that Polian pulled the bait and switch. You come to the team and we give you part ownership. Then he said no.
Right.
They made Abe
Yeah.
Polian have to be the heavy. Now all coming out that Abe Polian saying you can't talk to the player like that, Mike. You're not
I don't think none of us
you're
had
not
an
helping the team.
idea how
You're not helping the
dirty
team.
Mike is behind the scenes, man. I think that documentary.
Well, that's a different. No, I knew Jordan was cutthroat and competitive. I knew these guys, they're very corporate, they're very smooth. You don't want to meet Michael Jordan or Larry Bird or Isaiah Thomas in a dark alley. That's not something you want. Believe me. They're nice guys, but you do not want to meet them in a dark alley. They have a gangster quality to them. If you in the way, it's something that they want. And it's between you and you in their way, you're gonna get out of there.
Yeah.
And but the difference is that you can take when he was playing at the Chicago Bulls with Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, Bill Cartwright, 7-foot center, block shots, rebound, as a superstar in college too. You know, Paxson, BJ Armstrong, so on and so forth.
Armstrong. Yeah.
You're basically taking Secretariat to the Kentucky Derby. You
Yeah.
can take another horse to the Kentucky Derby, but if it ain't Secretariat or Affirmed or Seattle Slew, you're probably gonna lose. And you can only hit that horse. They have a limit on how many lashes you can give that horse at the Kentucky Derby. You know that, right? I think it's a limit.
No.
Yeah, it's a limit. You can't hit the core horse for so many times. And so in the Preakness, the horse, I can't think of the horse's name, Rumbear, whoever won the Kentucky Preakness, the jockey ran a perfect race. The jockey stayed within distance, maybe third or fourth. And then when the others broke out, he made sure he was third. And then he tapped the horse lightly, so he could pull up. And then he got close to the horse who was in first place. That's when he hit him with the whip. Let's go. He hit him with the whip twice. Then he hit him. He took some more pace. He hit him again. Hit him a couple more times. He only hit him with the whip like 5 times. Then he tapped him lightly 2 times. Perfect race. You can hit a horse 100 times. He can only go so fast. The Washington Wizards could only do so much. That team that Jordan had could only do so much. They weren't. That wasn't Secretariat. You took to the Kentucky Derby. And so you can tell them we got to win now. And you can ride them and you can embarrass them and you can say all these things, but you can only get so much out of the team. And some of the players, I saw a podcast with Eton Thomas, Tyrone Nesby,
Yeah.
Jelani White. I think it's Jelani White. Jahadi White. Excuse me, Jahadi White. Chris Whitten, who said that some of the players were upset when Jordan came. Tyrone Nesby said Jordan was going to play his position, so that means it's less shots for him. And he had to come off the bench, so he wanted to be traded. So several players wanted to leave. They didn't get time to develop. A lot of times, they got fewer shots when Jordan got there. Before Jordan got there, it was like we're going to develop the team, and then when Jordan got there, we got to win now. That was the attitude. But I think Kwame felt mistreated about it, by Jordan. Felt mistreated by the media. He said Stephen A. Smith was basically going on a crusade to make him the face of, why it's bad for high school players to come straight to the NBA. So the other side is that the owners were losing money. Owners were losing money on some of these trades, some of these draft choices. You're picking guys out of high school. It's a hit or miss. It's hit or miss coming out of college, but you still have at least a couple more years to see these guys. And the NBA expanded. They were making so much money with these TV contracts exploding. They were making so much money, so they kept expanding. But when you expand like that, you water down the product. And so the owners were losing money. They didn't want these kids coming straight out of high school anymore. But the black community is going to say, "Oh, you're racist. Oh, that's not. You're anti-capitalist." So they had to have cover to tell these kids to go back to college. And Kwame made it seem like Stephen A. Smith was on a crusade. He may have been paid by the league to actually go around to colleges and talk about Kwame Brown and what a bust he was, because politically the NBA did not want these kids coming straight out of high school. They wanted to put in a one and done rule. They knew it wouldn't be popular with the public, particularly with African Americans. And they had Stephen A. Smith make Kwame Brown the scapegoat. He was definitely doing it on TV. He said that nobody really knew who Stephen A. Smith was. He wasn't a permanent part of the ESPN. He was like a guest speaker. He kept talking about Kwame Brown, what a bust he was. And that's how he got popular. And he made a career outing Kwame Brown and calling Kwame Brown a bust. And he said Kwame couldn't say anything. He can't say anything to a lot of times he never was interviewed. He definitely couldn't say anything about the owner or Jordan. They were signing his checks.
Right.
So, and also gave a lot of cover to Jordan. Jordan didn't do a bad job of drafting. Kwame Brown just happened to be a bust. So politically, it seemed like it was not just Jordan or certain members of the media, but the whole NBA wanted to make him a scapegoat and want to politically maybe use Kwame Brown as an example of why guys should not come out of high school. And could you imagine looking back now? Because a lot of times when you were young, you don't really remember a lot of things growing up, but you always remember how people treated you. And you can contemplate things that happened to you at 17, 18 years old now, even though you didn't know what was going on then. And you can look back and see what people may have taken advantage. That's what he's pissed about. See, I'm a grown man now. I can fend for myself, and how the media mistreated him. And he's just telling his side of the story. And for him to go at Michael Jordan and nobody saying anything, for him to go at Michael Jordan, that took a lot of guts. Probably even more guts than going at All the Smoke or the Breakfast Club or whomever, or Stephen A. Smith, in my opinion. So that seems to be what he's pissed about, and he seems to have a legitimate gripe. 20 years of, he's been out of the league, for a while. 20 years ago he's a rookie, and people constantly riding this guy, constantly talking about Kwame Brown, constantly making him the face of, why kids shouldn't come straight out of high school. He's a bust, but not talking about other players. So he's dealt with the media a lot more than we have. We're talking about it from the outside looking in, but he's actually dealt with these people and how they get ratings and how they bash black men for ratings. A lot of things that we've been saying, that a black man, heterosexual black man, is probably the most hated creature on the planet right now. And if you want ratings, all you got to do is talk slick about black men. So he's pointing out a lot of these issues, and I think it's resonating with the public. It's just saying in a different way than what we're saying.
Yeah,
I think that's what he pretty was mad about. What do you think? What do you think all this says about the media, the state of the media?
Well, I thought it was interesting when you first brought up like Donahue, because watching, like really that evolution, even with Oprah, if you remember, like the first few years that Oprah was on, was, she replaced Donahue. And Say that again.
Exactly, she did.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
the help,
She
with the
replaced
help of
Donahue.
the help of the black community, the whole black community was riding for Oprah.
Yep. But if you recall, her show, much like Donahue's, was a more serious show. It talked about actual issues. Quite often, I think, an objective was to get kind of both sides of an issue, or at least folks with opposing points on the same stage to kind of hash out whatever the topic was. But typically those topics were, heavier topics. So whether it was things that impacted us politically, whether it was things that impacted us economically, whether things that were rooted in a certain ideology or philosophy, but it sought to get at least that was my impression, was to get the sides or opposing sides of a topic on a stage. And, that's some of Donahue's, I think, at least for me, more memorable episodes, not just for the fighting, but even just for the shock value of like, oh my God, how can you put these people on the same stage?
Right. Well, back then you also have like a Shahrazad Ali. You also have a Louis Farrakhan on Phil Donahue show.
Yeah, you also had Dr. Huey Newton on
exactly.
Phil Donahue, right along with Roy Ellis.
Right.
You had serious people on these shows, but then you saw the devolving of them, because if you remember,
Ricky Lake,
like after Donahue went off, Oprah came in, and I'm assuming that her ratings weren't doing that well.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, you really start to get the fringes of a Jerry Springer, but it wasn't full on at that point. Right. You got that friend where it became much more entertaining. In other words, not as serious. The content was not as serious. It was typically more, more relationships, more entertainment, like he said, she said things, and you sprinkled the more serious topics in. And then that became the model, because then that's when the door opened to the slew of folks that followed Oprah, like Sally Jesse Raphael, Ricky Lake, Jerry Springer. Obviously Jerry Springer said, well, I'm not going to dabble in it. I'm diving in head first. And right. That's when we get almost like the shock. Jerry Springer really was like the Howard Stern of TV, though. Right? Where it was all shock value.
Right. But would
even,
you say
Morton Downey Jr.? Remember
right.
Morton Downey Jr.?
Yeah. But would you say that the shock value was evenly distributed, whether it was black or white? Like Maury, Morton, which I think was a New York show, right? And
yeah.
Distributed. I think it wasn't just like we're gonna clown these black folks for a white audience. It's like everybody gets it. Everybody gets it.
It was more evenly distributed. Matter of fact, there's another show, and it's funny because I saw it on YouTube. Like I remember seeing this show, but I don't remember these hosts. So when I saw the show, like again, maybe a few years ago, it was a clip on YouTube, with Huey Newton after the dismantling of the Black Panther Party. At least, from what Huey Newton described as the Black Panther Party, some would say it never like dismantled, but it was just, my point in bringing it up is that I think there was an even distribution. Even matters that were considered controversial, such as race, which I don't think has ever not been controversial. So typically anything that's geared towards the Black community, the intro or the entry is race. So whether it's race-based policies like affirmative action, like civil rights movement, to then get to more nuanced conversations such as self-determination, nation building, understanding the difference of Black nationalism versus essentially American nationalism. But typically that was the approach, is that it was still a more serious approach, and it was more of an even kill. So even as the entertainment value began to shift and we began to get more entertainment versus substantive topics, there are, at least my perception, I didn't feel like a lot of it was targeted. Honestly, I feel like I actually want to rewatch some of those things because, I didn't understand some of the things I understand now. I don't have the same knowledge, so I wouldn't have watched things in the same way today that I would have then, because maybe it was, like maybe it did target us. Maybe it was a targeted effort in the same way. In fact, when we look at COINTELPRO, when we look at like John Patash's book, CIA counter surveillance and entertainment industry, I mean, it's well documented the government's hand in entertainment, and in Hollywood. I certainly don't put it past them as if it was just this natural evolution that coincidentally got evolved to where we are today. In other words, was it all a part of like a master plan? I don't know. But I am more inclined to believe that it was a part of a plan to evolve to this point, because one, if we're looking at things kind of from a 30,000 foot view, where, essentially post 1965, when we look at what's happening with the Black family, when we're looking at what's happening with labor and wages within the Black community, specifically Black men, we're looking at education levels, we're looking at the rate of essentially one-parent households. I don't think it would have necessarily taken a genius or someone that had this, this master plan, so to speak, to easily see that there's a demographic of people that can be targeted without any repercussion. Like we've watched, in other words, since 1965, the little political power, the little economic power that we as a community were beginning to gain quickly eroded, very quickly eroded. Between the early 80s and 1965, that's less than 20 years. And in that time period, mass incarceration was already having an effect. Our neighborhoods were already flooded with heroin and crack cocaine. Our neighborhoods were already flooded with crime. Philadelphia literally on the only bomb that the U.S. ever dropped on its own soil was in a Black neighborhood. So in other words, the combination of our most visible Black organizations were deteriorating. Republic of New Africa was shrinking visibility. The Black Panther Party was already coming apart at the seams. Many of the Black Panthers were already murdered. this point, already assassinated by this point. The NOI was making a political stance, much like Malcolm criticized NOI for they didn't take after Malcolm's assassination. It's not like they took up Malcolm's mantelpiece and said, okay, maybe he was right. Maybe we should take a more politically active role within the community. So in other words, you have this firestorm. Our families are being torn apart. We are looking at reduced education rates, higher crime rates, higher incarceration rates, higher drug rates impacting our community, and shrinking visibility of prominent Black organizations. I don't know how impactful CORE or SNCC was for you in the 80s, but I can tell you, for me, like if you said SNCC, I wouldn't have known what the heck you were talking about. I thought maybe it was probably a shorthand for Snickers. Like, are you hungry? Like, if you would have talked about SNCC to me. So in other words, when we talk about impact and efficacy, these are the organizations that we look to for visibility to help usher in that political power, gain the economic power. They're shrinking, and we have these other massive structural changes that are devolving our community at the same time. So by the time we get into a late 80s, by the time we get into a Morton Downey Jr., Sally Reffy, Jesse Raphael, and all of the other all of the other talk shows, like the slew of talk shows that was on from the late 80s to the mid 90s, the only thing that we were left with at that point was entertainment. Like the only thing that we were left with from a visibility standpoint was entertainment. So what's the downside? What's the downside for corporate executives to make the decision that they're going to target African Americans in terms of entertainment? We are going to cater to the, most common denominator. We're going to give you pure entertainment, the Tony Browns of the world, like the Tony Brown Journal, even what's the name show, which came on decades later, not Ricky Smiley, but Tavis Smiley. Shows such as that gave us those substantive conversations began taking a deep back seat. They're no longer on mainstream. You had to, check them out on PBS at 2 a.m. in the morning. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so
across from Elvira, right?
I think it was, looking back, in other words, like seeing all of those things collectively happening, I think that I am inclined to believe that there was some intentionality there, and that we were watching the devolving and how we got to the point of a Jerry, because even Jerry Springer, like to your point, initially Jerry Springer, a lot of it was, what we call trailer trash. It was primarily white people that, low education to no education, low income, and living in abject poverty, and, the cousins, they kissing cousins, and, just a hot mess. But then you started seeing Black people take a part of these stories. And, again, I think it's being into a demographic that was largely overlooked for entertainment's sake, because entertainment is largely driven by ad dollars. Right. And the more eyeballs you can get, if I'm a Jerry Springer, if I'm a Ricky Lake, and I'm fighting for ad dollars, I'm fighting for prime time slots to get to those heavier ad dollars to negotiate bigger contracts. then I want to get into an audience that really has been largely ignored. And other than black people, black people, we always made entertainment for ourselves. But that was really the first time that there was such a spotlight shown on black people as a whole. Like even if you think about a lot of the movies that came out, like black films after the black exploitation era, they were largely driven by black directors, writers, like what's his name?
Not Robert Townsend.
Robert Townsend. He funded his own film on credit cards. As he famously tells that story. We get this. We get the movies like "I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker" and "Strictly Business," and in other words, these films that catered to us. It truly was for us, by us. And I think a part of what we have seen happening in that transition is also our voices saying we shouldn't be ignored.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, and we're literally telling mainstream media, hey, pay attention to us, make stuff up. We want to see ourselves on TV. We want to see ourselves on commercials. We want to see ourselves on cereal boxes. When we go to the grocery store, when we look at the magazine shelves, we want to see us. We want to see all our melanin popping and all of that. Like, we want to see Black Girl Magic and all of that. And really what we're doing is we're literally begging corporate America, aka white people, to sell things to us, pimp us, please exploit us, like, please pimp us out, because we want to feel warm and fuzzy when I turn on my TV and I see somebody with 4C hair just like me and dark skin just like me and got a little child just like mine, and it's, you know what I mean? But I don't think that we really knew what we were asking for, if that was truly us as a whole. Because something I was just even talking about was that really us collectively as a community, or were that the voices of the few Black folks in Hollywood echoing that message? You know what I mean? Like, was that really a message that we took on as a community? And was that a collective objective of the community? Or was that really a message that was being pushed by the handful of Black people that were in those rooms, in the writers' rooms, and, meeting with executive producers, etc., that was pushing for representation, pushing for visibility, which, obviously makes sense, because if I'm a director, an actor, a writer, and I want to write things that, I get to shine at, then I want to be able to write Black characters. I want to be able to direct Black characters. I want to be able to tell stories of Black people throughout the diaspora. And at the end of the day, yes, it may benefit my community, but who also gets the first benefit? The director, the actor, the writer, because they get the direct check from that. So I don't know if that was us, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that was us, or was that really them? And then we just took on that message. Like, we just jumped on that bandwagon and say, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we should. We do want to see more of us.
Well, back then, if you wanted to have a TV show, Ricky Lake, Montel Williams, Jerry Springer, Maui.
It goes on and on and on.
Had to bring and Morton Downey Jr. I was watching that show. It come on Virginia like late at night, I
Yeah.
don't sure what time it came on in New York. Like it had to come on late night. It couldn't have it on during the daytime.
Yeah, because he
I
was
didn't
wild. That was a
I didn't
wild
know
boy.
I didn't know what else. I'm like, is this real? I was wondering, the
He's-
show was, is this really happening? I'm like, what in the world? I mean, I think I saw one time a guardian angel was on there, and somebody a guardian angel and like maybe a I don't know a Ku Klux Klansman or something, and I didn't know
Yep,
what
yep, yep, yep.
was
I
gonna
remember
happen.
that
Like
episode.
I was like, this was gonna happen. But anyway, you have to bring
Yeah,
the records if you
man.
had a TV show back then, and it's funny that Kwame Brown said that someone approached him allegedly that Oprah wanted him to appear on her show to talk about the benefits of growing up with a single mother and so on and so forth. And he didn't want to do it. I think they wanted him allegedly to talk about his father, who may have been in jail. And I think some of his brothers, who he said had been locked up, they were all down for it.
Mm.
They were all down for the segment, but Kwame didn't want to do it. So why would I go on TV and talk about my father? And I never got my mother's permission to do this. And allegedly,
Right, right.
and he said when he turned that down, all of a sudden the knives came out, and the media turned on him. You got this young basketball star, made history, first high school player, and he didn't want to talk about growing up with a single mother. They want to make it seem like it was positive, but he knew it wasn't.
Right.
Like, oh, what the one is growing up with a single mother. He said, I had to take care of my mom at some point when I became a teenager. I had to become the man of the house. And he talked about how people single mothers and trying to help single mothers, but that comes with a string attached. That comes with strings attached because at some point that single mother is going to need a man. And as a kid, you see those strings and how people pull those strings. And he said, I think he said his brothers were down for it. He said, no, I'm not doing this. And after he allegedly turned that show down, the knives came out and the media turned on him. That's when all this negative commentary came out about him. So he's seen that side too. But it seems like things are coming full circle that we're now asking for less of the entertainment and more of the information because I think the country in general gravitates towards gossip and entertainment. Not just black people. I think everybody likes gossip entertainment. And if you're talking about something serious, a lot of ways you are going against the grain. And like you said, being part of being a man, like I played high school football and I knew I was going to get jacked up out there. It's one of the smallest kids out there. I knew I was going to get jacked up. The point of it is, you know, you're going to get jacked up, but you go out there anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You slog through it. That's part of being a man. A man is not in the 8th grade, go try to play against the 5th graders. That's not being a man.
Right.
Facing your fears. That's part of being a man. A man is standing on your square and a lot of times saying something that may not be popular. And don't care who and not care who doesn't like it. So when you have a podcast or you have gossip, you're not gossiping. You're not being entertaining. You're not gyrating your neck, and you're not snapping your fingers. And that's why you're having problems with CNN's having problems because some of those no content. I mean, I haven't watched the news in I don't know how long. And you're not repeating random Democratic talking points, and you're not saying Obama's got a black wife. Look, Obama goes to a black church, and Trump is a racist. Just for these random Democratic random talking points that black folks already believe, just for ratings. At some point, that wears out, and at some point, you have to have your integrity, and that's all you have left. And as long as you maintain your integrity and you stand on your square, you can always. I think doors will always be open to you. If you compromise your integrity, I think you can have doors closed to you, even though it may feel good at the moment. But at the end of the day, you are who I am, who my parents raised, my grandparents raised. You know what I'm saying? So and a lot of times you think you're the norm, but actually you grow up and you realize that you're an outlier. There are not that many people who are willing to go against the grain. There aren't that many people who don't mind not fitting in, to say what needs to be said and say things that are not popular. And when you do that, you ruffle feathers. I think George Carol Oates, author George Carol Oates, she said when you write a certain way, writing, for instance, writing is a transgressive act, regardless. If you write differently from other people, if you write in a way that other people don't, people find that abrasive. Same thing with the media. If you say something in the media, same thing. That's what Kwame's running to. You say things that are abrasive you're basically asking for it. You say things that are different from everybody else. And what Judge Joe Brown said that why a lot of people in the media are coming for Kwame, people who didn't even know him 2 weeks ago, because if you're half stepping and Kwame comes along or someone else comes along with heat, with content, it bothers people. This Pharisees and Sadducees are telling people they're miracle workers, and Jesus comes along and perform a real miracle. They're not going to celebrate Jesus; they're going to crucify. So you have Kwame being attacked by people in the media who probably out there half stepping, engaging in clickbait, gossip, entertainment. Guess what I know about this person? Guess what I know about that person? And the audience, a lot of these people's followers on YouTube, I think they like it, unless they see an alternative. I think Kwame that people can put out real content and have something to say, and not just say things that are popular, not just engage in clickbait for views. So it seems like things are coming full circle. While I think Oprah was young and hungry, and she took over Phil Donahue. You have Ricky Lake and Maury and Maury and Jerry Springer and Montel Williams and other people came along, became more entertaining, and it made almost like push Oprah to become more entertaining, or have people not watch a show. I think things are coming full circle now. I think people want less entertainment. I think they want more content, and people with content, and the people out there who maybe have stuff and they can listen to what we're saying and try to steal our content, or go the way of the dinosaur. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's like on one hand, like I empathize with the need for a mental break. Like I consume a lot of news on a daily basis. I probably read at least 15 or 16 different news publications. And that's just the news. So it's not even including long form, like actual books that I like to read that, at this point I don't even remember the last like fiction novel that I've read just to, like enjoy a book for the sake of reading. Most of the things that I probably say at least for the last decade, maybe even more, that I read are either technical or nonfiction, and usually some basic. But the point being is that most of the news, and one thing that I'm constantly conscious of is what drives print, what drives like video. So we talk about a CNN, we talk about a Fox News, and even local channels. Typically, you'll see a little bit more of a balance to a local, where they give you 3 stories of tragic events that happen locally. They'll make 1 or 2 nice stories or something. Somebody lost a wallet and found it.
Right.
They had the annual bake off. And the thing that drives print is typically negative news. Very rarely, very, very rarely, when I'm going through print, so whether it's Chicago Tribune, whether it's the LA Times, whether it's the Washington Post, whether it's the New York Times, whether it's the New York Post, whether like literally on and on and on, it's typically negative driven. And I think most of us are at a point in life where you probably, look out your window, or you're constantly on, consuming some media, whether it's through the phone, mobile device, computer, TV. Most of it is negatively driven. Mm-hmm. And I even find myself like actively looking for those lighthearted, cheesy stuff like, oh, you bought a puppy, that's great. Like, let me see a picture of the puppy. Because you need that mental reprieve. And I think in a lot of ways, that's the entertainment value. That's why people care about what a celebrity is wearing, and the award shows, and why they keep up with celebrity lives, and because in some ways it becomes a break. Like Kardashians, what they celebrated 20 years on TV. It blew my mind. Like, I didn't even realize they had been on TV for 20 years.
That's scary.
I think I watched it when it first came on. I'm not ashamed to say I watched, I think maybe like the first couple seasons.
I thought you were gonna say the first couple episodes.
No, I watched the first couple seasons. I'm gonna watch it here and there. Because it was a mental break, like it was my little like I can turn my brain off, watch something nonsensical that's not heavy, that's just genuinely kind of stupid, but it's not something that is philosophically challenging, is not something that's ideologically challenging, is not something that makes me think beyond that moment in time. And yeah, so I haven't watched it really since then. So when I saw that, it's like, oh, it's 20 seasons or the final set, I was like, wait a minute, what? But I think that's a testament to this very conversation, because if folks hadn't been watching them in such droves, Kim Kardashian, I don't know if anybody has taken over, but when she, I think, jumped on Twitter or Instagram, like soon as she started using social media, she instantly became the number one person followed. Mm-hmm. And the point being is that clearly that's a sign that entertainment has its value, has its role. In fact, in some ways, knowledge is a curse, right? And I think, one, especially being Black, two, especially being a Black male, the more the more information and knowledge that you have, the harder it actually becomes to even watch the most innocuous things without seeing the gag. It's like, it's like, all the tricks to every magician, but you love magic. But you can never go to a magic show again, because every time you go to a magic show, you see the trick. And I think that's kind of the curse of knowledge, to a large degree.
I think a famous poet had that saying. That his curse is that he can see the sunrise before the rest of the world can.
Oh, wow, I never heard that. Okay.
Famous poet from Britain. I can't think of his name. If I told you his name,
Okay. But yeah, I think that in some ways that's what it is. And I think a lot of folks simply want to turn their brains off. The majority of folks, when we look, we talk about the economy every week. And, we don't really see it getting better. The largest swath of laborers in the market are considered unskilled. That was the largest hiring pool over the last 2 years, was what is considered unskilled or low skilled. And now, they've transitioned from being low to no skill to essential workers. So in other words, like, what is life like if you're barely, if you got to have 2 or 3 jobs simply to keep the roof over your head, put food on the table, take care of children or even family members that you may have? Like, what is life like, in other words? Mm-hmm. Like the last thing that that person wants to do, I would think, and even coming from that household, hey, the last thing that, you know, parents want to do at 8 p.m., 9 p.m. after the kids have gone to bed is spend time taking on things that frankly are out of their control.
Mm-hmm.
You
Okay.
know, taking on the burden of knowledge of the things that they see on a daily basis. Like, you don't have to tell, you know, middle class people how poor the country really is. Like, yeah,
Right.
no shit. Like, like I live it every day.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I don't need you to tell me about it. But ultimately, other than standing on the soapbox and telling them about it, what can they do about it?
Got it. Got it.
And not having control over that just becomes another thing.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes another burden. And I think this is where the value of entertainment comes in. To your point, I do believe that we are seeing some shift to where, you know, people are gravitating towards more substantive conversations. But clearly they're not hitting the numbers by a long shot.
But I think that's what Kwame's saying though. He's saying that he's talking about something serious, but he's adding entertainment to it. He's been entertaining at the same time while he's talking about something. Just people aren't just gravitating to. I mean, he to his live stream, to his YouTube channel, for no reason. I mean, they're going in droves.
Right.
Mama's cooking and seasoning or whatever. That
Yeah.
but he's mixing it with something. He's saying that talking about very serious stuff in a humorous way. And humor is
Yeah.
really a way of saying something serious. And we don't really get that. You can't really see our personality come through a lot of ways when you're online per se. But if there
Yep.
was an audience here, I think it would be more. You know what I'm saying? When you had an audience, it would be more. You could kind of see more of the personality, the audience, how the audience reacts to you. You can see
Right. Right.
how, right, because I think we're not just talking about something serious. I think we're trying to be entertaining, saying it in a humorous sort of way too. But I guess my point is that listen to Gilbert Arenas talk about how you know the gun incident at how the gun incident unfolded at when he was with the Wizards, or how many cars he wanted to buy when he was a player. I mean, that's I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that type
Yeah.
of, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like mindless stuff that people think that people follow along because he's a celebrity. I think you have to have a good mix, and I think it's people are asking for more, even when it's just a news slide. Um, I can't really watch the even like CNBC's become like entertaining to me. Just like
All of
what we
those are just
know.
op-eds, man. Like,
Right. Like the guy
it's
Jim Cramer.
yeah.
But so we got 10 minutes left. So one last parting shot.
Oh, for man, that was fast.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you know what? I guess I would like to see. Yeah, just as the beginning, I would actually be really interested in hearing more of what like the things that Kwame is doing um in the community, that he talks about. It would be great to see some of that. And for him to essentially show that blueprint that he's chosen to follow, and essentially for the same reasons that he talks about, to be the inspiration for the youth, and be inspiration, and not even just for you, but even adults that will look at that and see, like, oh, that is something that is doable, that is something that's at least attainable to push for. I hope it does inspire more collective participation. That was the I think, really good thing about the big three that Ice Cube put together, for years and years, I think decades at this point. It's not a new conversation that Black people should organize and start their own leagues. That I feel like that conversation gets re-energized every decade. But to see the big three come to fruition, I was really happy about that, and would like to see more of that along the lines of a lot of these players pooling the resources that they do have. And let's be clear, even $1 million is still not enough resources. But essentially maximizing what you do have to impact your community. Like one really great thing that I would love to see, or one way to even get involved is, bringing those leagues or sponsoring different teams, but allowing the community members themselves to buy in as well. For those that can buy in, even if it's more, symbolic in terms of, pitching in your couple $100, to say that, you got 0.00001, almost like a fractional share of your local team, that can at least lead to more buy-in into the community. Because if there's, even if it's not a stadium, even if it's, an outside park, but that's the community's park, because that's where our team plays. That's where our league plays. So in other words, we need to take care of that park. We need to invest in that park. We need to make sure to expand, the green space on that park. I want to make sure that my children play for that team, my grandkids play for that team, my cousins. So in other words, we get this collective buy-in, around an idea that can generate, that could, possibly generate development dollars for our communities, and ultimately by our communities as well. So I think, I would love to, I guess, hear and see more of what Kwame is doing along those lines that, he talks about, because I think it would be a great inspiration, even for younger athletes as well. One of the athletes that outside of LeBron, is, like, to me, LeBron is definitely, the GOAT off the court, even more than Jordan. But another young guy that's coming up, Zion. And he just produced his shoe. I don't know if you saw that. He produced his shoe, and he used his little brother's drawing. And I thought that was like, I love that story. He used his little brother's painting. And I was like, man, how dope would that be, to give, kids the ability to contribute to the shoe. And especially, we saw it with Shaq, we saw it with Marbury, making affordable shoes. In other words, we saw the same thing with Dominique Wilkins for a hot minute back in the day. Yeah. But in other words, using their influence, using the resources that they do have,
exactly,
to make some positive changes within our community, instead of waiting. And even if they feel that it requires more political engagement, be that political engagement, start the pack. You got the money. Take, $5 million, $3 million to start a community pack, so that you can start engaging in the political mechanisms of the community that you're from.
Exactly.
Why not buy an alderman? Why not buy the support for mayor, for governor, for, you know what I mean? Like, why not? Like, be that, be that inspiration, be that starter. Instead of buying, 2 more homes, why not take those dollars for the 2 more homes and, build an affordable housing complex, or better yet, build a, factory that can bring some manufacturing to that community, and then bring an industry to that community.
Right.
And then, pay a prevailing wage for that community, and really revive the community. The big 3 did it with Detroit. The steel mills did it with Pittsburgh, and, other places throughout Pennsylvania and Indiana, and essentially the Rust Belt, where industry can change the face, like a single industry can change the face of an entire community, so much so that when we see the effects that some of these communities have never recovered. So why not be the engine to even start those industries, and bring those industries into places like a Detroit, places like a Jackson, Mississippi, places like a Compton, California, where you're bringing, textile manufacturing, where you're bringing, semiconductor manufacturing, things that will drive government dollars, that will drive private dollars, that can change the entire face and outcome of a community, instead of, the houses and the cars. And
Right.
you know what I mean? So that's what I would love to see. That's my last take on it. I would love to see, how Kwame Brown is doing some of that. So I look forward to, continuing to see that brother.
Right. He talked about. Thanks for that. He talked about. Kwame specifically talked about building tiny houses. For
Yeah.
women, for single mothers. He talked about helping to support kids. His growing up, he didn't have shoes. It's not as simple as providing sneakers to kids, particularly kids who have
Yep.
big feet and shoes who find hard to find irregular sizes. He said he was doing it out in California when he was with the Lakers. That barbershops were asking him, "Would y'all just donate some shoes to kids who have big feet and have hard time finding sneakers?"
Yep.
He says he's letting people actually make money from his videos. So I'm going to let you guys make money from my video. I'm not gonna tell you take it down or invoke some type of patent infringement. He's letting people put his videos up on their YouTube page or up on their sites, and they're making money off his videos. So he's kind of like being part of the community and saying, "Look, it's not just about me; it's about everybody collectively." That's a different type of mentality, and that's a lot of the professional athletes. What they talk about is really just capitalism, just black capitalism, and their individual capitalism. But there are professional. I grew up in Virginia. People ask me, "Do you see any of the Nets or the Knicks or the Giants players or the Jets?" I'm like, "See them where?" I mean, they're not part of. They have a NBA basketball team. They're not part of a community. They're not part of any ecosystem. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I'm not saying they should be, but that's not how it used to be back in like the 70s and 80s. I think people want to be part of the community. I think the professional athletes now have this sort of VIP type of treatment. I want to go to a bar or club. I want to be separate from everybody else. I want to be up here. Right. And so you're asking people to have a collective mentality. And I think a lot of them really grew up with a collective mentality. A lot of times what they're promoting is just individual capitalism. They have melanin skin, but you talking about some black billionaires, no different Gates or I don't know, a white billionaire to me. And they don't have an ecosystem or being part of a community. What's your point? It's another black person with melanin in your skin who have to have. I'm really preaching individual success, black capitalism, but they're not part of an ecosystem. If they're part of an ecosystem, some type of corporate ecosystem, I mean, you're going to help some big corporation make money, and
Yep.
that's just it's a foreign concept. Unless that person grew up with that, like Zion or Kwame, that they grew up with that mentality, or that sort of foundation. You're almost like talking to a brick wall. You know what I mean? But Kwame is say he make money from his videos, so he's already kind of like being part of a community and saying, we're all in this together, and you have some skills I don't have, and vice versa. What you're doing, and so on and so forth. He's also bringing, obviously bringing. I think he's trying to grow his podcast or grow his live stream, and eventually maybe it will become a podcast. He's had Judge Joe Brown, other guests on there. I think he had a lady on there who was supposedly helping criminals re-enter the workforce and re-enter society, helping them find jobs and housing, stuff like that. I think he supposedly had her on his and try to raise money for her organization. So he's doing a lot of things he's purported to do, and it's a totally sea change from my cars and my sneakers, and look at my sneaker collection, look at my car collection, look at my this sort of what you hear from other athletes or entertainers. And I'm not saying that's not going anybody else, but I think Kwame is providing a business model, and he's speaking on a mentality of someone who actually has resources, who can hopefully make a difference. And actually, you have to be the change that you want to see, and you just can't
exactly
talk. You just gotta go out and do. So yeah, I'm looking to see what else comes from him. I think he's definitely going to grow his podcast and see if he can grow it beyond just taking shots at or some of his former teammates or whatever, or all the smoke or what have you, and see if he can grow it beyond that. But I think a lot of what he's saying, things that we've said, he said in a different type of way. But I'm a big fan of his. That you have a black man who's standing on his square and saying things that aren't popular, that people may not like, and really don't care. And as far as black society, we just can't keep going around trying to see which plantation we can be a part of and which corporate entity we can be a part of. And as an independent person, I kind of feel where Kwame's coming from. That 40 million black folks, you woke up to then and try to figure out how you're gonna help some Fortune 500 company make money today. That's your goal in life.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's Trump and the G. Kwame Brown surpasses Michael Jordan as the GOAT, and right now he is the GOAT. He's standing up for black men. He's standing up for black society. He's saying a lot of things that that needs to be said that other athletes don't have the heart to say. He's putting out real content that's a sea change from all the smoke or the shop or just some athletes sitting around talking about their sneaker collection or their car collection or where they went on vacation. So that's Trump, and this is Trump and the GE, otherwise known as just the Heat. And I want to thank Torian Mitchell again for sharing a lot of the for his take on Kwame, and bringing the heat the way he's supposed to. So that's Trump. Thanks a lot.
All right, brother. Yeah.